You're listening to Data Center Therapy. Please take a number, and an engineer will be right with you. Hey everybody, good afternoon, and welcome to the third episode of Data Center Therapy by IVOXY Consulting. I am Matt Yeti, and joining me as always is Mr. Chris Crow. Chris, how are you today?
Oh, doing quite well. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
Good.
It's a sunny day. It's a hazy day, right? We've got the wildfires really kind of messing with the air quality here, but every day is like, okay, it's going to move on, and here I am itching my eyes from allergies. So we wait for yet another, hopefully, clear day coming up. But other than that, all right. So we have a little surprise for everybody today. We've got another one of our consulting engineers joining us today, Mr. Ryan Grelck, who actually is not only new to the podcast, but relatively new to IVOXY Consulting. Now, the way we can tell time, he could have come on 2 years ago, and it might have felt like 2 weeks. But Ryan, how long have you been with IVOXY?
I've been with IVOXY since early April, like first week of April.
So we're looking at like four months already. Oh my goodness! So yeah, to my point, it felt like you came on like last month. Really.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your IT experience?
Sure, I've been doing IT for 20 years now, since almost 20 years, I guess. Started doing Y2K stuff, moved on to doing desktop, then into operations, and I've been doing Horizon View for about 10 years now. And then on to IVOXY.
All right, so you say Horizon View, and that happens to be our topic of the week. We're gonna kind of deep dive into Horizon View, and namely version 7.5, which has quite a few changes. It's currently VMware's top of the line current supported release. But Ryan, I mean, when it comes to Horizon View, there's two pieces, right? You've got View, but then you've got desktops that run in View as well. So how's your sanity going nowadays dealing with that?
That's good. Yeah, I'll be working the whole stack, it seems. So it's pretty good.
Understated as always. Well, okay, so you've had some time to dive into 7.5. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Very cool. You mind going through some points?
Sure. So with 7.5, this is the new ESB release, Extended Service Branch release. And what that means is it's going to be supported for 18 to 24 months. It'll have 3 service packs within that 18 to 24 months. So you'll have your ESB initial release. 6 months after that, your first service pack. Then 3 months after that, give or take, your second service pack, and then another 6 months after that, you'll have the third service pack, and then it's just support until that support ends.
This almost seems like they want to try to get on a cadence with Microsoft with their... It sounds like Ubuntu was one of the first guys to start this long-term service branch stuff, and then Microsoft's gotten on board. Is this... I mean, VMware might not admit it to you. Do you find that they're going to actually try to stay on Microsoft's cadence or a little bit right behind it?
That's the whole reason that they're doing it. They actually did admit that because of Microsoft's 6-month release schedule.
Yeah.
They have the main branch and then the smaller branch each year.
Yeah, I wonder about that sometimes. It seems like these more frequent releases with Microsoft are just wreaking havoc with a lot of my customers, at least, that are running Windows 10. So hopefully
it's a huge pain, yeah. And then during that ESB, they will support all of the releases that Microsoft comes out with. Not on day one generally, but there will be some delay.
Well, they've got to have access to the pre-release builds anyway behind the scenes. So hopefully, I mean, if they're switching to this kind of cadence, one would assume that on the back end, when a Microsoft upcoming Windows 10 build goes into a developer preview, that one of those developers hopefully is VMware, and they're ready as soon after. Because even though it's always best practice to usually sit bleeding edge -1, right? At least. There are a lot of people out there who like, the feature drops, I want it. I don't have time to wait 3 or 6 months to test it, and the customer will want to go to that almost immediately.
Yeah, and the thing with this also is they're deprecating support for older builds. So with 7.5, the furthest you can go back is 1607, which is like the bare minimum that I would suggest even installing View on.
So Windows 7 is dead.
Oh, that's just for Windows 10. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking
okay.
Windows 10. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
They are still supporting Windows 7 up until it's done with Microsoft, or so.
Boy, that's an interesting point, right, Chris? I mean, the fact that a current release of the OS, and I'm not talking about minor release, but the major release, Windows 10 has builds that they're actually just saying it's changed so much we're not even going to bother supporting that.
Yeah, that really is something. And it seems to be a bit of a broader trend within operating systems, right? To rev these a little sooner and expecting updates. Where at least back when I was doing desktops, those seem to be a much longer service life for things. So I'm curious, Ryan, just and slightly off topic with 7.5. How many of your customers are running Windows 10 versus Windows 7, and kind of out there? Just if you were to take a swag at it.
They actually have a mixed environment. Most are still Windows 7 because they just can't. It's very difficult for them to grasp that jump from Windows 7 to Windows 10 because it's a paradigm shift with how you manage those desktops.
Oh, okay.
And I think they're also probably dealing with a little bit of quicksand, at least right now, where Windows 10, just by the time they settle in and they get comfortable with 1607, 1703 is right hot on the heels, and but wait a minute, I don't want to do stuff there, and they just can't seem to. This seems like the predictable cadence, I think, is going to solve a lot of that anxiety about moving, because you can be sure that it's going to work and it's going to be a relevant release for longer than a 6-month time period.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
And another thing with the ESBs is they're in that current ESB release, there will be no new features, only service packs, and a new ESB will come out every 18 to 24 months. So you could potentially have multiple ESBs to choose from. So next year, there will be probably 7.6, I'm assuming. And then that would be coming with new features and stuff like that.
So is 7.5 out today?
Yeah, it's been out since May.
And we've got current release and the ESB branch are currently the same?
Correct.
Is that how it works? Okay. Anybody else getting thirsty talking about ESB?
I do like my bitters.
Sorry, it's the first thing I thought of when you said that.
Can we change this to a
podcast?
A data center therapy and beer podcast? Is that allowed?
I think we can work the word thirsty in there somewhere, I think. So, Brian, why don't you break down a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, about some of the View deployments that you've done in terms of where you see a lot of people latching on, because a lot of people hear View and Horizon View, and they think of, here's my virtual desktop, and I boot into it. But there's a lot more than that. I mean, we've talked about app volumes. We've talked about UEM internally and with our customers. For those who may not be familiar, what kind of technologies can they take advantage of? Those other components of the Horizon suite, so to speak.
Sure. So they have a pure application virtualization technology called ThinApp that'll allow you to run incompatible applications on unsupported platforms. So say you need an application that requires IE6. Well, you bundle in IE6 into that package, then you can now run it on Windows 10, for example.
So for something like app volumes, how is that different than, because ThinApp is a term that probably a lot of people who are listening have heard before, and it's been around for a long time. So what's app volumes? What's the difference there?
Sure. So app volumes has it uses it can use thin apps, but you could also have standard installed applications. And what that does is it mounts the applications into a VMDK. So you mount, assign the apps to an AD group or anything, and then assign it to that user or group or OU, and those apps will be assigned at the at login, or you could assign them as the user's actually working. And
okay. So I mean, you get better performance that way when you're able to mount the VMDK right to the virtual
correct.
desktop instance.
Yeah, and you could have a very basic image that might just contain all of the dependencies like Visual C++ and all of that on it, and then just layer in all of your applications through app stacks. And that's the easiest way to do it, but it requires a lot of maintenance and planning beforehand.
Sure.
Now I'm curious because I heard that VMware also introduced the ability to virtualize and present just applications, kind of like what Citrix has really been doing as their bread and butter for a while. Is that something that's included with the Horizon suite? Is it something that can be standalone, or what does that look like?
So it depends on the licensing for the Horizon suite, but that is included in Enterprise, I believe. And then there's an actual Horizon Apps SKU with two different versions, a standard and an Enterprise, I believe.
So does that compete directly with like a Zen app or a RDSH implementation?
Absolutely, it does, yeah.
Okay, nice.
And it can leverage the VMware technologies, on the back end, along with their own display protocol called Blast Extreme, which is a highly tunable, high-performance display protocol, which works a lot better than RDP or PC over IP, which is another.
It also has the benefit of not requiring a license fee like PC over IP probably
exactly,
does as well. It might have
That's why they
touched
push
the
it,
nerve
I believe.
there,
Yeah.
but I mean, as long as Blast and Blast Extreme, I mean, if it has the chops, whatever. I mean, competition is good, and ultimately, as users, we get the benefit from it.
Yeah.
So, in terms of Horizon View, the other piece I wanted you to kind of go into, Ryan, was the User Environment Manager. Now, this is something that, from what I understand, VMware acquired a few years back.
Yep.
But and in those early days, I was really skeptical and cautious, maybe are the words. But in recent months, when I've worked with it and implemented it, I was really impressed, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best parts of the Horizon suite nowadays. It's just so flexible, so powerful. And what UEM does is you have your traditional roaming profiles that Microsoft has. Well, with UEM, you have two shares, a config share and a user data share. And settings are pulled in through a group policy, then applied. You set up the settings in the UEM console. And then from there, apply it to the desktop. And what it'll do is save all your settings and grab exactly the settings you need, not the extra app data fluff that comes with a roaming profile or persona management or the other, persona management type applications.
Yeah, I've really liked that you can thin out your group policies as well, and you can replace a lot of the things that you used to need group policies for with UEM based policies. Really, you can and instead of go ahead.
Oh, and moving from group policy to UEM, it'll even apply a lot faster than group policies.
Well, that's the point, right?
Love, yeah.
That's the stage of logon that everybody in View troubleshoots is like, oh man, I see this black box called group policy logging, and your virtual desktop environment can't break that down. I mean, it's happening on the domain side of things, so you get to fight with Microsoft or try to.
Yeah.
If you can simply remove things out of that stage and bring that stage to nothing, essentially, and handle it all post, it definitely makes for speedier logins. Have you seen that out there, Chris? Did you get a lot of that?
Well, it's been a number of years since I've worked heavily with anything desktop related, so I'm mostly user on this end, although my parting joke on it is the logins go a lot quicker if you don't care about any of the user data, but at least that's the philosophy in my lab, which is
Yeah.
why they don't let me be a Horizon administrator anymore, probably.
So there is a new feature that I wanted you to go into, Ryan. Horizon View JMP.
Sure. So JMP, VMware pronounces it JUMP. It's their just-in-time management platform. And what that does is it integrates a workflow for admins to assign users to a desktop workspace that includes desktop pools, app stacks, UEM policies, and I think eventually it might be the replacement for actually creating and assigning pools and app stacks. So what it does is it layers in those three main technologies: instant clones, app stacks, and UEM. And sorry.
Yeah, so I'm guessing, like, if this, give me a scenario where you think right now this would be a better use case than right now. Okay, I'm guessing it's a quick. You've got somebody doesn't plan. They say, "Hey Ryan, man, I need to deploy. I got training coming in this afternoon, and I need this kind of setup." Is this a quicker way to get there than having to go through a pool setup?
Yeah, because you can use an existing pool and then layer in those UEM policies and app stacks, such as the. So, say you have an app stack for finance, an app stack for HR, and an app stack for your admins. You could all assign them, different AD groups, and then assign all of those UEM policies to those verticals if you want, and then point them all to the same pool, and then they don't actually have to be assigned to that pool. You assign them through Jump.
No. Okay.
It almost sounds like a manager of managers in a way of
exactly,
slicing some of these features without having to have some rigid design. So is it also true that it kind of helps with some of the sprawl that we've seen around view pools?
Yeah, hopefully it'll start cutting down on the number of pools, because sometimes you might have a dozen pools for different use cases, and this will hopefully cut down on that need for those.
Yeah, I think this is kind of the next phase in trying to manage the managers, Chris, because with their cloud pods, I think that was kind of one, try to get our arms around where users are signing in and try to steer them in the right location. Usually that's based on geo, but I think I like your point there where this is really trying to, the feature set is quite robust. Now it's how do we scale this? Now, okay, a shop that's 100 users, they don't deal with a lot of problems. A shop with 1,000 or 2 or 10,000 users, there's got to be a better way to organize, and I'm that to see VMware making that developmental effort.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Ryan, do you have anything else you want to add about a View before we move on?
Yeah, there's a new Horizon console that's HTML5 only, which is good. Hopefully
there's no Flash, you promise?
Only in that console. But to get there, you have to log into the admin console, which is the Flash, and then you log into
Wait. You just told me there's no Flash. You know what? I have a new name for this podcast. If we ever want to change it, it's Flash is a 4-letter word.
Yeah?
How about that?
I'm okay with that.
Anyway, I was promised no Flash, Ryan, and you're letting me down so far, but please continue.
I mean, going through a Flash console to get to the non-Flash console, it's like...
it's a little ridiculous. And then in that new console, they've integrated the help desk tool, which I don't know if you guys have seen, but it's awesome. It shows CPU, memory, login times, protocol issues. So say if they're getting drops or their frame rate's really bad, you can actually see that on the console. And then that now supports Linux desktops, which it didn't before. And it has a performance tracker where you can actually see how long group policy took to log in versus login scripts versus drive mappings, app stack assignments, and stuff like that.
Oh, that's
very awesome.
I really like the user that calls up and says, "Hey, my desktop's slow. What's going on?" And you can pull their session right up and look at their CPU, look at their memory utilization, look at their IOPS, their latency, if they are getting packet losses. So you can say if it's on the wire or if it's on the back end. It is to your point. It's one of the cooler features I think of Horizon.
Yeah, and it's great for the administrators. It's a fantastic tool.
Now that's an enterprise SKU only feature.
I believe it is, yeah. Unfortunately,
it's kind of to the point now where vSphere was 4 or 5 years ago, where you really want to be looking at Enterprise Plus on the vSphere, and it just seems like you certainly don't need typically everything that's in there, but there are 1, 2, or 3 real key features that kind of bring you to there. So It seems like View has gotten to that point as well.
Yeah, and a lot of our customers are upgrading their SKUs to Enterprise.
Yeah.
It seems.
But they're excited to do so, it seems like.
Are
right.
Absolutely needed nowadays.
Right, for that visibility. Well, that's cool. Chris, have you upgraded to Lab yet, then, to 7.5?
I don't even do my own upgrades anymore. I have the View team do it.
We did it. It's upgraded.
Is it? Oh, nice.
Wow. Talk about automation.
New every day.
No help desk calls though so far, right, Chris?
No. I'm an easygoing user. I don't even keep track of my own personas. So yeah.
Well, so our segment that we like to move on to in this phase, at this stage of the podcast, is something we call I've never seen that before. I don't know if we're going to stay too true to the verbiage there, but I know you've got something interesting that you wanted to mention, Chris.
Oh yeah, and I have certainly never seen it before. So I actually was chatting with a customer about this little issue, and of course I spent a lot of time in the automation realm, and so this was a triggered automation where the customer wanted to provision a new SQL server, but the tricky bit about it was this SQL server had about 2 terabytes of disks attached to it. At least this template that they wanted to pre-provision. Now, something that maybe not everybody knows, but there's a 2-hour timeout for VRA to provision. Now, for anybody who does some back-of-the-envelope calculations, and by the way, the protocol for this was NFS running on NetApp storage, to read 2 terabytes, and of course from NFS being file level, it does really look through that, you have to be moving about 240 megabytes per second in order to pull that off within a 2-hour window, and off of SATA disks with 3 gig SAS connectors, that can be a challenge. So this was going over. So this is a little bit of, haven't seen that one before, but I would be curious from you guys, how would you solve that particular problem?
Can't you leverage FlexClone on the NetApp?
I was almost thinking that VRA actually has the ability to do flex clones from within there. Now, of course, there's some volume management stuff that they would have to do, but I think that would be a fantastic solution.
Well, if I can extrapolate on that, Chris, before I was an IVOXY employee, I was at a company that brought IVOXY in to do the whole virtualization thing. And we were a NetApp customer, obviously vSphere, and I had a dev team. I was the global systems architect there. It was like a one-man kind of show. And we had a dev team that was very keen on dumping .bak files, right? So you got the big, fat, uncompressed SQL backups, and then they'd leave them around, right? So I'm like, once we switched to NetApp, storage got, per gigabyte much more expensive than just the platters we had hanging sprawled across all of our servers. And basically what I did was I wrote a PowerShell script that leveraged PowerCLI and the NetApp PowerShell libraries to basically handle the snapshotting of the volumes that held the database volumes, and then had an already provisioned SQL server, even though it was just a naked bare bones install. But then it would hook up the log volume and hook up the cloned log volume, the cloned data volume, and then it would go into the OS itself and mount up and assign drive letters.
And that I think would be a great way of doing it, yeah.
And then it would run SQL CMD and actually bring the databases online. There's your dev box, and then I had a batch file they could run that basically reversed it and then redid it to when they wanted to refresh the data off of prod.
That's fantastic. So, and I'll pause here to say that in automation, probably the best way to fix this, but it is a bit more work, is ideally with automation projects, we only want one template. Whether it's a web server or a SQL server or an app server or it doesn't matter what. And then after the provisioning process or the clone process happens in VMware, do any modifications after that, add additional disks. But there's one other thought, and this is going to be a little bit of audience participation. I've noticed that when I have templates that are residing on an NFS share, and I clone those off being file level, whether they're thin provisioned or not, because remember, that is really, at its heart, up to the NFS server how the provisioning works. When I read those back, I actually read the full amount of the VMDK. So here's the question. If I have 2 terabytes worth of disks and I'm only using a fraction of that, if I was to move that over to iSCSI, would I have the same problem? And at least from my testing, I don't think so, provided I'm going to a thin provisioned format. So but I'm curious what people think. So drop us a line in the comments or at our email address, which is podcast@ivoxy.com, with your thoughts on that. I'd certainly love to hear what people have found with testing.
Little light reading. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Thanks for bringing that up, Chris. It's I've got a few never seen that before, but some of them might go back like 15 or 17 years that I think we'll bring out once we start to run out of things to talk about. But I think we've got a ways before that's a possibility.
We are always creating new bugs as an industry.
It's a really, really well taken point. So true. So true. Well, that about brings us to the end of our agenda for episode 3 here of Data Center Therapy. Thanks for joining us, Ryan. I hope we have you on a more regular basis. I know we've got some other engineers as well who are chomping at the bit to hear their voice on the small screen, as in your radio. Yeah. You can subscribe to Data Center Therapy on iTunes. I think we're on Google Play, Stitcher, and Overcast. Ryan just gave me the thumbs up on Google Play. He's an Android man, clearly. You can check out the podcast on ivoxy.com. You can also comment at ivoxy.com. And as Chris mentioned before, email us at podcast. That's singular, podcast at ivoxy.com as well. Hit us with an email if you got questions, comments on Chris's question. If you want to talk about an upcoming project, want to hear us talk about a topic, or maybe even you want to be a guest on the show, hit us with an email. Again, Ryan, thank you. Chris, always nice to see you as well. Thanks for making some time. And to the listener out there, thank you for listening to Data Center Therapy, the IVOXY Consulting podcast. We'll talk to you soon.